Hello and welcome to the Sonic Cinema podcast. My name is Brian Scuttle and thank you for joining me at www.sonic-cinema.com as well as the Sonic Cinema podcast YouTube channel. You can also subscribe, rate, and review at other podcast platforms like Apple, Google, Spotify, and basically wherever you listen to podcasts. The Sonic Cinema podcast will be there. Check us out at patreon.com/Sonic Cinema with the Oscars coming up. I will be going through those nominations. It's been a bit slow this month, admittedly. Still kind of catching my breath a little bit after Sundance. And then I've got a film festival not this coming week, but next week that I will hopefully be having some coverage for. And that will be at Patreon. A lot of that will be at patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. I do hope to get back to Twitch sometime soon with my work schedule being predominantly nights. It's been a bit difficult to really get on there. But I hope to, depending on how things work out, I definitely hope to be going back to twitch.tv/ScuttleLemur. And finally, you can check out Banana Meter, which is a new sort of review aggregate website that I'm a part of, and we've done our launch this past month with movies like Jackass, Moonfall, Death on the Nile, Marry Me, Uncharted, and then the movie that we are going to be talking about in this podcast. And I also wrote a piece for the website on Johnny Greenwood's Oscar-nominated score for Power of the Dog, so you can check that out at Banana Meter. This is probably the quickest a podcast record has gotten off the ground in terms of myself and a guest. We talked about this starting on Saturday, and we were recording this on Monday. It is for the recently released latest sequel, remake, whatever you want to call it, for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And if we're talking horror, that probably can clue you into my guest. It is Phil Fasso. Thank you very much for joining me.
This is an emergency broadcast from the Sonic Cinema Network. Do not adjust cell phone or ham radio. Hi, Brian. How are you?
I am doing very well. I will say it was kind of funny to see the varying degrees of response that this movie got over the weekend, and I was definitely looking forward to it. Not in the sense that I'm a huge fan of the franchise and I want as many Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies as possible. I was based on what I had seen and heard in terms of the trailers and stuff like that, I felt like this movie was going to be ripe for a lot of discussion, and I will be honest, it certainly did not disappoint in that respect.
I decided to watch this because I saw the trailer for this. I heard that this was coming a couple weeks ago, and then I saw the trailer, and I get a lot of guff from my friends who all tell me that I'm very negative. I'm a very hard critic, which I am. I'll be honest about that. I'm very hard on entertainment. I went into this thing with the attitude of, I hope I hate this as much as I think I'm going to. And I absolutely did. I'm not disappointed by that. You know, we talked last time, I believe it was last time we spoke about Dr. Moreau there.
Yes.
The night before Dr. Moreau. This, if not having surpassed that as the worst film we've ever discussed, I would put it definitely in that league. This is bottom barrel stuff here.
Yeah, this is... one of the things I say in my print review of this, and right off the bat, is I feel like the only reason to justify making any more Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies is to allow filmmakers to put their own particular spin on it. Because, let's face it, this is arguably the most chaotic and bizarre sense of a franchise, even more so than the Halloween movies, where you've got at least 2 or 3 different timelines that are going. There are at least 2 or 3 different direct sequels to this. There are some reboots. Everything else even some sequels feel like a reboot. It is such a bizarre thing. And I feel like the only reason to do this is a name sachet, even though like all of them they put chainsaw together as opposed to the original, which has chain and saw as separate words. But I feel like that's the only creative impetus to justify making any more movies with Leatherface.
You can't even justify this as like, okay, so a good portion of the template here is based on Halloween 2018. There's no denying that, right?
Yep.
But you can't even say that, hey, listen, we're wiping everything out and we're going with a direct sequel to the original because that's what that Leatherface movie in 2013 did. So you can't even that's not an original take here.
Yeah.
So here's my biggest issue with this movie is that this movie has 50 different points and 50 different things to say and doesn't really say anything about any of them.
No, it doesn't.
So I want to go back to the original for a second. Now, you've seen the original, right?
Oh, yes. I saw the original before the 2003 remake.
Okay. So I know because I read your review the other day that you haven't seen all of them. I unfortunately have. And this is one of those franchises where there's a lot more bad than good. Okay? Mm-hmm. But I want to go all the way back to Tobe Hooper's original, right? So Tobe Hooper's original is really a thing about the counterculture being eaten up by society, right? We're just coming out of Vietnam. You get these hippie kids, they're coming along. They end up innocently in this farmhouse and they come across this family who is absolutely insane, and you find out that, they used to work in the meat packing plants and, they used to basically, in the slaughterhouses, right? Mm-hmm. But the industry's gone south and now they basically have no source of income or food. So they're eating people, right?
Yeah.
So they're literally eating the newer generation, right? It goes back to, Romero's Night of Living Dead made some of this, and with those zombies. Basically, the new generation is being eaten by the old, right? Vietnam, it's a statement on Vietnam and some other things. So my first issue here is, okay, well, I don't even know how you want to attack this because there are so many different points here, but I just want to say something about family before we get anywhere else, okay? So in the second film, have you seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2?
I have not seen that one.
Okay. That's the first one I ever saw on cable back in the 80s. That is by far my favorite. It goes a complete 180 from the original and goes, because Tobe Hooper basically said to himself, I can't just do this again or it's going to be the same film. So he turns the second one into this brilliant black comedy, right? Mm-hmm. It's just, I don't want to go into it because I could do a whole spiel on that. But one of the characters introduces in that second film the line that the saw is family, right? And then when you get to the third film, even though they don't mention that line, it's actually written on the chainsaw, like it's embedded in the steel on the chain on Leatherface's chainsaw. Mm-hmm. So the whole impetus for this franchise seemed to be that the saw is family. Because this isn't just some, like, Michael Myers is just, he's gone insane. He's going to kill people, right?
Yeah.
It's not really a family thing after, they try to turn, whatever. And, Jason has his mom at the beginning, but that's not really so much about family after a while. But the first few Texas Chainsaw, actually, pretty much everyone except this one, has family as a huge part of it. Now, you're supposed to look at them as this outside crazy family as opposed to your modern day American family. And maybe it's a statement about how all our families are crazy. I mean, my family's nuts. I don't know about yours, but, there's that statement there that, hey, the saw is family. Okay? So if that's the case, why is Leatherface in an orphanage in this one? That's my first question.
Oh, yeah. There are a lot of questions with regards to this. And, yeah, the well, and why is a 70-year-old, which is gotta be what Leatherface would be aged at this point, why would he be in an orphanage at this point?
So if you went by, I read something the other day that if you went by Gunnar Hansen, because Gunnar Hansen played Leatherface in the first one, if you went by Gunnar Hansen's actual age and what he would be at this point if he were still alive, Leatherface would be 74 years old right now. So why you have a 74-year-old in an orphanage, I don't know. The film doesn't seem to know. And if the film can't explain it, how the hell am I supposed to explain it, right?
Yeah. No, this makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, the only thing and this gets to one of the points, because one of the things that this movie clearly wants to make us believe that it has on its mind is the idea of gentrification, of the idea of making something old new again, something hip, something, trendy that people would come to. I mean, and that seems to be a big part of the impetus here because of the fact that these young entrepreneurs, I guess, or I don't even know what they are. Like, are they entrepreneurs? Who are these people? I really have no idea.
Well, I mean, they're all from the school of, the basically characters, they're all from the school of cardboard characters. Let's put it that way. So you have no development for any of them. I have no idea. But I want you to think of what you just said. Gentrification is the idea of something taking something old and making it trendy and new for a newer generation, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that the whole purpose for this sequel?
That's the only that is the thing that really, and I mean, that was when I said on Facebook that I was watching this. I mean, I'm like, hey, you know what? Leatherface against like hipster culture, I'm not against that idea. The issue is that this movie doesn't really know what to do with this idea. And or it loses the plot because of the fact that you also have Elsie Fisher's character, who's the survivor of a school shooting. So she has some trauma she's having to get over. And, it's like naturally she's going to have that turn where she's going to have to fend for herself against Leatherface. And it's just bonkers. And then you have this whole legacy sequel idea of the lone survivor from the original, Sally, who's not even played by the same actress as the original.
Well, she died back in 2014, so I think that bringing her back might have been an issue.
This is true. But and this is one of the moments where I can't really tell if this movie is trying to be a genuine legacy sequel in the same way the Halloween movies are, or if it's trying to just like poke fun at the idea of what legacy sequels are, because Sally is about as ineffectual to the story of this movie as any legacy character I've ever seen.
All right, so let's talk about legacy characters, and let's go to Laurie Strode for a second, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so first off, obviously Jamie Lee Curtis is horror's most famous scream queen, right?
Yeah.
And she comes from a famous family. She did a bunch of horror films early on. She went on to have a very storied career. She's been in some very popular movies. She's done a whole bunch of stuff, right?
Yep.
She is an actual actress, all right? So they decide, okay, well, we're going to bring her back in 2018, which is also a retread because they did that 20 years earlier, but we won't get into that. So they bring her back, right? But the whole thing is so they actually developed her character in that 2018 movie.
Yeah.
She's been paranoid. I mean, you got to figure she was, 17, 18 years old when she got attacked, right?
Yep.
She has spent 40 years. She's destroyed her family. She's been married 2 or 3 times. She has a granddaughter who she's, she doesn't really have much time with, because they're fractured, right? She's gone on to become like a survivalist in this little town in Illinois, right? She's got all these guns and set up, and she's got her house set up. And all of that makes sense, right? All of that makes sense, and it's developed. And it's developed because you have a real actress who people are going to care about 40 years later. And you also have a situation where, they've taken that character. And as much as I don't like the 2018 flick, at least they developed her on a point that makes sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sally Hardesty, the last time we see her, is on the back of a pickup truck screaming, and is covered in blood, right? And she's screaming as, Leatherface is wielding around the chainsaw as the sun goes down or comes up or whatever.
One of the great closing images of a movie.
Absolutely. And then we don't see her for almost 50 years. So I'm supposed to believe, without any kind of buildup or background, because they just toss her character in there. Yeah. I kind of think that might have been a studio note, like they had a script and then said, okay, well, it worked for Halloween, so now you need to put Sally Hardesty in there, right?
Yeah.
So they put her in there. I'm supposed to believe that this chick became a ranger, because they do say I believe they say she became a ranger, like a Texas Ranger at that point. Mm-hmm. Spent the last 48 years hunting this guy down, right? To the point where, and this is actually a neat little homage to the original. I don't know why she keep this picture, but she has a Polaroid on the inside of her visor on a car, which I believe, if you watch the first one, is supposed to be the picture that the hitchhiker took of them in the first one.
Yeah.
So why she would hold on to a picture of the 5 of them that was taken by somebody whose family tried to kill and eat her, I don't really know. I don't think I'd be very fond of that picture myself, even if it had me and my 4 best friends in it,
Yeah.
So, and again, we're going to get into spoilers here, right?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay, so here's the thing. I'm supposed to be invested in her because she says she spent 50 years tracking this guy down. Now, keep in mind, his family lived in a house like through some woods from her family house from that they went to visit in the first one. So why this guy and his family would be so hard to find, I don't know. Maybe she doesn't have a compass on her. Maybe she lost the sense of direction. Maybe the truck drove her to Idaho and she got lost. I have no idea. One way or another, though, she finally gets him in a room. He doesn't have his chainsaw in his hand. He's sitting on a bed. She's got the drop on him.
Yep.
It is a clear, straight shot. She's 3 feet from blowing his brains out. And she's like, you don't know who I am? Oh, my God, how do you know not who I am? And then he, walks off.
Yeah.
I'm like, are you kidding me? I mean, just slap me in the face and tell me you hate me. Tell me you're a dick and this movie's a dick and it hates me. Because that's what you've done with that scene.
It's so stupid. I mean, it's one of the funniest things I saw this entire weekend was somebody posted on Twitter so in Avengers Endgame, there's a scene in the final battle with Scarlet Witch and Thanos. And Thanos killed Vision for one of the Infinity Stones in Infinity War. And she has this moment where she's like, you took everything from me. And Thanos goes, I don't even know who you are. And somebody basically took that meme and transplanted it into this. And it was like, oh God, and that's all I could think about when that moment came up in the movie. It's like, so not only do you have this point where it's like, you have this rivalry between these two characters that really is ineffectual because of the fact that, he clearly hasn't given a shit about her. Because, I mean, at least Jason in Friday the 13th Part 2 is chasing down the final girl from the first movie and kills her right on the spot. I mean, say what you will about Jason, but at least he's taking care of shit. But
he gets the job done.
Yeah. But it's like Leatherface clearly doesn't give a shit for Sally, and it's like you're right. Like the idea that Sally has become obsessed with him, but has not been able to find him, which is kind of ridiculous. And somebody brought up today that I mean, it's hard to get scared by a movie called Texas Chainsaw Massacre because I don't live in Texas. And it's like, yeah, that's fair. And it got me to thinking there really aren't too many slasher killers that have really traveled. Like, I think Jason is the one that's traveled the most. He's gone to Manhattan, he's gone to space. I mean, at least he's trying to get around. But at the same time, it's like that. This movie is just so insane, and it's just there are so many choices. But the fact that like Sally doesn't even get like that heroic moment that like we get from Laurie Strode in being able to confront Leatherface and have any impact on the plot whatsoever.
If you put Laurie Strode in that same exact situation, if you take that scene and pull out Sally and put in Laurie, and you pull out not Jason, if you pull out Leatherface and put in Michael Myers, she's blowing his brains out.
Yeah, absolutely.
She's taking his head off with a shotgun. She's not going to be like, oh my God, you forgot me? What is this? Did you break up at the prom 50 years ago? What is this?
And I should say, like, I love the original movie. I love Tobe Hooper's original. It's one of the most visceral horror movies ever made. And it's one of the things I will say, one of the things I do like about this movie is that even though it's very obviously not, it's very obviously not made on the cheap in the same way the Tobe Hooper movie was made, I do kind of feel like this movie brought at least a little bit of grime and grit back to the franchise, because that's one of the things I hate about the 2003 movie is that it was very obviously polished in that Michael Bay aesthetic. And
well, see,
it just didn't work for that.
I actually like the 2003 version because I think that Andrew Bernarski is absolutely terrifying as Leatherface in that movie. Mm-hmm. The mask, I think, is great. I've met Bernarski before. He is the size of a small town. He's tremendous. He's huge. And I think that he's perfect for that role. I rarely get scared by horror movies, but every time he's on the screen, I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So I don't mind. I understand what you're saying that it had the sheen on there. I don't think that this was, and again, if I'm going to give this new one credit for anything, I do have to say that the cinematography was really nice in this film.
Yeah.
I don't remember the name of the cinematography, but that was the one thing I can compliment, that there were some really nice shots in this film. Mm-hmm. There's no logic to it. There's no point that they leave developed, but yeah, sure, why not? So can I ask you a few other questions here?
Certainly.
Do you think this movie is pro or anti-gun? Because I have no idea.
That is part of the problem with this movie is that it really doesn't seem to have a particular stance whatsoever. It's like I don't know. I mean, are we supposed to believe that Elsie Fisher's character who has clearly been traumatized by a school shooting is going to be able to survive a situation like this? I mean, and much also put away her terror over what happened to her in a way that she will actually brandish this insane chainsaw shotgun thing, which by the way made me think that when Frey versus Jason came out, one of the things that people really wanted to see was Frey versus Jason versus Ash. Give me Ash versus Leatherface.
That would be awesome.
Because at least Leatherface and Ash would be on equal ground when it comes to the weapon of choice. I would love to see that, and I think that I truly think that would be like as great an idea for a spinoff as anything you could ever think to do with Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
That'd be cool.
That being said, this I can't tell one way or the other whether this movie is pro-gun and anti-gun.
So here's the thing: they introduced this idea, and I actually thought it was kind of cool because I've never seen this in a horror movie, right? Normally, you get characters who are going through their normal days, and then they get terrorized, and then they have to fight back at the end. This is the first time in a horror movie that I've ever seen, and I've seen a million of them, where they've involved the school shooting as part of it, right?
Yeah.
So the whole thing is she got shot. She got shot, obviously, actually, and her bunch of her friends died. They show you a couple very quick flashbacks.
Yeah.
Where she's like on the floor and she's bleeding and there's bodies everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. So the thing is that she gets to this town, and we'll talk about her sister making fun of the guy at the gas station in a little while, because that's a whole separate part of this we need to deal with. Right? The guy's got a gun on him. He's driving this big truck, right? So they end up at the town, and this is the guy that they've the one sister makes fun of him, and this is the guy that they've actually hired to help them, set up this town for these influencers and gentrification, right?
Yeah.
So she wanders off. The sister doesn't want to be there, and Elsie Fisher, the other Sarah Yarkin, I think her name is.
Yeah.
Melody's a character name, right? So Melody's the one who's like all big on this gentrification stuff. She's like, look, you have to come with me. You don't have any family, and I got to take care of you because I wasn't there to take care of you at school or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the sister clearly doesn't want to end up in this podunk town, this deserted place. So she wanders off and finds the guy. And he's working on his truck in his garage, and he's got a semi-automatic on the counter or whatever on his tool table. So she picks it up and starts playing with it, and he starts, explaining to her how to use it and all that. So my thing is, I'm getting the feeling that she's like, okay, well, instead of being afraid of guns or being anti-guns, she's like, my thought process is that she's got to be saying to herself, if I had one of these in my hand when these killers came into school, I could have prevented all this by killing them, right? That makes sense to me, right? Unfortunately, you get both sides of this story. So you're not get a strong argument because the sister's anti-gun. She seems to be pro-gun at the moment. Sally Hardesty is pro-gun until it comes to the point where she's 3 feet from Leatherface and can murder him, right?
Yeah.
So all of that involved comes down to the ending, and she ends up with the gun in her hand. And I think one of the few points I enjoyed was when she goes to shoot, and either the clip isn't in or the safety's on, so she can't actually kill Leatherface even with the gun in her hand.
Yeah.
So I don't even understand that that's trying to tell me that guns aren't effective, or I have no idea what the take is on this, Brian. Mm-hmm. If you're going to introduce something like that, and you can be subtle with it, you don't need to be, sledgehammer me with it, but one way or another, you should be telling me whether you are pro or anti-gun, because I can't figure that out at all.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that goes to the writing, and I mean, this is from a story from Fede Alvarez, who did the Evil Dead remake in 2013, is behind the Don't Breathe movies, and it's, it has, I love the first Don't Breathe. I think it's a fantastic film, but like the second one was just so. The second one just rubbed me so much the wrong way because of the fact that it felt like it was saying the wrong things compared to what we saw from the first one. And I feel like that is, I mean, it's not exactly the same thing in this movie, but it feels like there's no thematic point to a lot of the ideas in this movie. And to your point, it's like, it's fine to show, to a certain extent, it's fine to show, different angles on something like, gun ownership, gun usage, and protection, and all of that stuff. But at least make sure you have that fleshed out enough in your script to where we understand where you're going with it. And this one just doesn't.
Not at all. Like, how am I supposed to feel about these protagonists? Am I supposed to like them? Am I supposed to be happy that they're kind of dickish? Am I supposed to just want them to be, chainsaw fodder? I don't even know.
Yeah.
So going back to that scene I was talking about, the gas station, this girl, and this is supposed to be from California, I think. This Sarah Yarkin's character, Melody, is basically like they come out and she's like, they're in the gas station and talking to the guy. Oh, and you want to talk about legacy characters? Let's talk about John Larroquette real quick.
Yeah.
Who came back with narration for this, but now it's a documentary apparently that they're playing in the gas station conveniently at the same time that our characters are in there, right?
Yeah.
So John Larroquette really should have been allowed to make an announcement during that saying, hey, by the way, you can catch my other legacy series because they're bringing out back Night Court and I'm going to be part of that too. So they walk out of the gas station and the guy he gets out of his truck and he's just pumping gas.
Mm-hmm.
Which, when you have a truck, you have to do. You have to pump gas. And let's face it, in the backwoods of Texas, you'd probably want a big pickup truck. I could see that,
Mm-hmm.
I live in Idaho now. I come from New York, but the last 9 months, I've lived in Idaho. I see pickup trucks all the time because if you're living on a farm, they're multi-purpose. You could do a lot of stuff with a pickup that you can't do with a Toyota Corolla, So the one girl, Melody, starts, and she's clearly saying loud enough where the guy can hear her, right? So she's clearly saying, hey, the guy's compensating with this big truck for having a small dick.
Yeah.
And it's like, why? You're wandering in the backwoods of Texas. Why would you want to piss off anybody? Probably not the best move.
No.
The black guy, whose name, I think his name's Dante, that character.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the black guy is so upset about this Confederate flag. And he's like, okay, so I understand.
Yeah.
I understand that, it's first off, that shouldn't, people in the South, across the South, a lot of them use that as a symbol of the South's going to rise again or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You lost the Civil War, get over it,
Yep.
So I understand that he's pissed off about that. But he seems to be saying that, hey, if all the other entrepreneurs who are coming on this bus see this, they're going to say, we don't want to be part of this. Okay. Did you do any vetting with this town before you decided to bring 50 people there on a bus?
Yeah.
Did you actually visit? Did you actually go to the town before you talked to some people on the phone? Mm-hmm. Did you actually make sure you had all your documents in place before you chased out a lady and gave her a heart attack in a truck?
Yeah.
Because, and he's all pissed off because he says, and I think that she says, because, okay, so let's get into Alice Creek for a second. She runs this orphanage, which only has one orphan who's 75-year-old Leatherface at this point. Right? So she basically says, hey, look, I don't have any problems. I've had plenty of boys of, I don't know how she phrases it, but she's basically saying, I've had black people that I've raised here, right?
Yeah.
But because of the way she phrases it, and again, this is she's got to be in her 70s at this point, right? She's not a young woman. She's probably lived in this podunk town of Harlow her entire life and doesn't have any experience. And I think that she's trying to phrase it not to offend him. And then he gets very offended and goes, I'm calling the cops to get you out of here. Mm-hmm. So am I supposed to like any of these people? Because I don't.
Well, okay.
I don't like any of them.
No, and you're absolutely right. And case in point, they mention it, they're actually from Austin.
Oh, so they are from Texas.
So they're from Austin. And it's like, that makes there's so many things that don't make any sense in this movie. Not the least of which is what happened with Leatherface and his family in 1974 clearly happened. There's a documentary about it. Yes. How in the hell does anybody not know about this when you come to this town? It makes no sense.
Well, I mean, I guess you can go to the point that, and I don't know if they're trying to make this statement, but you can kind of say that kids today aren't nearly invested in history as, kids were in the past, younger people were in the past.
Yeah.
You can make that argument. That speaks against them also, and you're right. I don't know. Is the bus coming in from California? I thought they said California.
I think that's what it is. I think that's what it is.
And then this kid, the only character development I have about Dante, the black kid, is that he's your angry young black kid, so he's a stereotype, and somehow or another he's a chef.
Yeah.
So again, I don't know, because this entire town they're going to rebuild seems to have one strip out in the middle of nowhere. So I don't know how successful a restaurant's going to be in the middle of hayfields in Texas.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, so you get to that. So I mean, I don't think I'm supposed to like. And then they turn Melody into one of the protagonists. Like, she's one of the survivors at the end. They kill that blonde girl off very quickly. And by the way, did you notice that whole her crawling across the cop thing is right out of Scream 2?
I haven't seen Scream 2 in a while, but yeah, it's that actually makes sense. I mean,
that scene is right out of Scream 2. Right out of Scream 2. And I find it kind of funny, going back to that particular scene, that Leatherface is wearing Alice Krieg's face for the entire movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, they kill off the characters pretty easily, except the two sisters there. And then toward the end, okay, so at Death Ensemble, I have this thing called the Wile E. Coyote School of Protagonists, right?
Yeah.
So the Wile E. Coyote, if you've ever watched the Wile E. Coyote cartoon, he's incredibly inept at trying to kill the Roadrunner. Right? To the point where he ends up blowing himself up with 10 tons of TNT. He falls off cliffs. He gets hit by and run over by Mack trucks, right? All that. But 5 seconds later, he's fine. Nothing can hurt this guy, right? I have no fear that he's immortal, right? Well, I hate when horror movies do this with their protagonists, and actually the antagonists too, the monsters in these things, because that's exactly what these characters are. That girl, Melody, gets hit. Leatherface is at the top of the stairs, and he throws a hammer down.
Yeah.
And hits her right in the chest. And she's able to get up and move around like 5 seconds later.
Oh, it's ridiculous. Yeah.
They get smashed against walls in that final scene in that movie theater. Like, he hits her with something, and she flies like 18 feet and lands, and then she's up like 2 seconds later, right? So I hate that. But the worst is Sally Hardesty. Sally Hardesty, let's face it, she's bringing her back. If you're not going to do anything with her, don't bother bringing her back.
Yeah.
Right? So after she doesn't kill him, he runs a chainsaw through her, right? The chainsaw goes right through her guts, right?
Yeah.
So 5 minutes later of screen time, she's talking to the other, she's laying in like a pile, and she's like, hey, take this gun. Okay, so have the filmmakers ever heard of the concept of bleeding out? Because I don't think they have. All right, so we covered most of the stuff I want to cover, but so shall we talk about the one line from the trailer that everyone's going to want to hear about here?
Oh, sure. Why not?
So there's 50 kids on this bus. Leatherface has killed several people. He's wearing a human mask. He's probably covered in blood at this point.
Yeah.
And I guarantee he doesn't smell too well, right?
Uh-huh.
He gets on this bus with a chainsaw in his hand, mind you.
Mm-hmm.
50 kids hold up their phones, and the Asian guy goes, you try anything and we'll cancel you, bro.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm gonna ask you how this film feels about influencers, because I don't understand that either, right? So they all hold their cell phones up. So I've worked, when I used to teach, and now that I'm in the restaurant industry, I've worked with young people for a long time, right?
Yeah.
I guarantee you, if 50 of them were on a bus and some guy came in with a chainsaw wearing a human mask, they wouldn't be holding their phones up. They'd be running, screaming, shitting in their pants, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no way that human beings would react that way. All right. So my thing is, I've seen a number of horror movies involving influencers the last couple of years, right? Because obviously, it's a big thing. I'm convinced that none of the people who write these films have ever met a real life influencer, because they're always caricatures of what you would think an influencer would be. Yeah. All right. There is no way that those kids would react like that as human beings. Okay. As cardboard film characters in a shitty horror film, sure. Yeah. There is no, have you ever met an influencer? Because I have.
I can't say that I have, no.
All right. I tend to think that they wouldn't act like the way they do in horror movies because they're all caricatures of what adult writers think they would be like. Okay, so I don't understand that I'm supposed to say. I think that I'm not supposed to like them. I also think that the writers and the whoever made this film, the creators behind this thing, didn't care how I felt about influencers because let's face it, those characters are all on that bus just to be body count. And that's the big, that's the big kill scene, So, do you have any feeling about the influencers in this film? They barely develop them. They show up, and I think there's one scene where they have an auction for 2 seconds, and then the bus scene,
and then they're
right?
at like a cookout and stuff like that. So, first of all, I would be remiss if we didn't at least acknowledge that the influencer that you are talking about that says try anything and you're canceled, bro, is Shintaro Shimosawa. I apologize if I mispronounced his name. He's a producer on this movie, and he was an executive producer on our good friend Jeremiah Kipp's feature adaptation of Slapface.
Which I will give a blatant plug right now. If you haven't seen that movie, please get on Shudder right now and watch that movie.
Yes, it is not only is it a considerably better horror movie than the one we're talking about, it was one of my very favorite movies I saw last year. It is a terrific film, and
absolutely,
it is well worth watching. So I have to bring it. So I had to bring up that. That being said, yeah, I mean, I understand, like, if you're talking about, like, the influencers who, like, brought the Fire Festival or something like that, I kind of see where you're coming from with the caricature of it, but at the same time, it's like the school shooting thing where it's like, and the gun thing where you don't necessarily know what the movie is trying to say.
We spend about, I think, 2 scenes with the young black lady who's like, I guess she's the one who organized all the entrepreneurs, influencers, whatever you want to call them. So she's the attaché between them and the Melody and the our quote unquote protagonist here. Mm-hmm. So I think that, and you get very little of her as well. I mean, she finds that kid Dante and he's bleeding and he's down. And then she gets on the bus and she's like, we gotta go, but she doesn't tell anybody why.
Yeah,
which I thought was kind of weird. Because if you told them why, maybe they'd take it so seriously and not pull out their cell phones. Now, again, you can't go more cliche than as they're filming this, you see one of their phones and you're getting comments from the people that are watching it live.
Yeah.
Like one of them's, oh, this is so fake, blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's just so generic. I mean, how about giving me something interesting?
I will
you
say,
have any comments.
I will say I did enjoy the comments, but because of how absolutely stupid it is. But, I mean, I guess to a certain extent, it's criticizing social media culture and stuff like that. But again, it gets to the point that it's so shallow in its criticisms that it ultimately is not really saying anything at all about it.
And that's the problem with this film. As I said at the beginning, there are 50 different ideas in this film, none of which are developed.
Yeah.
And that's my biggest problem. I mean, this would have been, there was very slim chances that the 9th Chainsaw Massacre was going to be some modern day classic.
Yeah.
But again, we deserved better than this. Mm-hmm. We definitely deserved better than this. Mm-hmm. And one more point I'd like to make, because I have one more thing. I wrote down these points for you. I've gone through all of them, but one more thing I'd like to make. So, as I mentioned earlier about the first one, a theme throughout these films is that, it's not just that Leatherface is killing people. It's that Leatherface and his family are killing these people and eating them, right? I find it kind of odd that 9 entries in, there's no reference to cannibalism at all here.
Yeah.
He doesn't try to eat anybody. I mean, I don't know how well fed he is. He looks like he's pretty plump for a guy who's been living in some ghost town for 50 years or whatever it is.
Exactly.
But, he doesn't look like He doesn't look like he's, not well fed. But again, and I don't think he killed anybody in a while because his chainsaw, for some reason, is buried in a wall in this orphanage. What?
Yeah.
That was just like, hey, let's make what we think is a cool visual with absolutely no logic to it at all.
Oh yeah, and it goes to the fact that why is it's like I guess you could make the argument that the reason why this town is as deserted as it is because of the fact that for economic reasons they had to leave because nothing was happening here and so on and so forth. But yeah, you get nothing when it comes to the cannibalism aspect of it. And it, the only hint at, that idea is when you have the shot, the transition shot to the cookout and you see the meat over the grill. That's basically it. It's basically the only reference you would get to raw meat being cooked for consumption. That's pretty much it. And again, if you're doing a legacy sequel, at least try to be somewhat honest with the whole idea of what made the original so unique. And I mean, certainly
try to be true to the source material.
Yeah.
Try to be true to the source material, because when you do one of these, and the unfortunate thing about, and again, Halloween, if we want to look at that, has 27 different timelines, right?
Yeah.
I'm not even going to get into that. But the whole thing that I hate about these legacy sequels is that they're basically saying, hey, all those other movies that you saw here in this franchise, we're number 15 or whatever, but 2 through 14, they all suck. So just disregard them because we're the real sequel. We're what you really need to come home to, right? Mm-hmm. If you're going to do that with this one, how do you not make this about cannibalism at all?
Yeah. No.
The whole point is that they're eating people because the economy is shit there. They were killing cows in slaughterhouses for a long time. The character of Grandpa, who's just this out of it, the deluded. He doesn't even have a dialogue in the first film. He's just sitting there in a wheelchair and they put a hammer in his hand so he can hit Sally Hardesty over the head with it. Mm-hmm. This has been a generational thing with them. They've been slaughtering cows for generations, and now there are no more cows there. There's no more slaughterhouse. So they've turned to cannibalism because the economy. And if you want to, look, and that is nuanced social critique.
Yeah.
That is not holding a cell phone up and going, you try anything and you're canceled, bro.
Yeah. That's
the difference between great filmmaking and this piece of shit. And speaking of shit, if I can make one more comment before we go here.
Certainly.
So I've never, ever seen a film where, and if we want to talk about blatant and not subtle, the film literally takes a shit on its protagonist. There is a scene where, and it's a pretty cool scene, I'll give it that, where she's under the floor and Leatherface is cutting through with his chainsaw and she's running ahead of the chainsaw. Yeah. And she gets to the point where she gets in front of a pipe and the chainsaw goes through the pipe and it's a sewage pipe and it literally drops shit. Mm-hmm. So if the movie is shitting on its protagonist, why am I supposed to care about them?
Yeah, exactly. I think the only thing I really have left to say is I appreciate that this movie went for the ending that it did, which, granted, yes, is a gratuitous lift from the original, but doing so as in a way where the character is traumatized all over again and is able to have the same anguish shot of looking back at the reason her life has been shattered as her car, which she is the only occupant of, is an electric car and apparently a self-driving car.
Yes.
I love how goofy that ending is. And it's I'm like, oh, there's no way they end that way. You've got to end it differently. And sure enough, they end it the only way that makes sense, where it's like, oh, you have, because of course Leatherface doesn't die. He takes Melody out of the car and basically decapitates her. And it's like, yeah. So
But I also love how it's daytime now, so I don't know how long this night was. If they've been standing around for hours after, because it was definitely in the middle of the night when Leatherface was chasing them around, right?
Well, it was clearly in the either late afternoon, early evening when the ambulance crashed.
Yes. So the thing is, it's the next morning now, and again, now you have this character who's not been through one tragedy with a school shooting, but now two, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, and they're like walking out to the car. They're all smiling, and she's like, "Hey, you know what? I think I do want to move here." I'm like, really? Are you fucking kidding me? What human being would ever say anything like that? Now, did you stay around through the end credits?
I did not. Did I miss something through the end credits?
Oh yeah, you did.
Oh,
there is a
damn.
very. So, have you seen the fourth Rambo film, the one that Lionsgate put out?
The one in Thailand?
Yes.
Yes.
So the very end of that scene has Rambo walking down the road, and he's obviously going home because he's settled now. Everything's good, right? He now can look at himself in the mirror and say, "I've done what I need to do. Now I can go on with my life." Well, this has a similar scene with Leatherface walking down the road, and he's walking toward what should be the house from the original. So apparently Sally Hardesty wasn't able to find that house, but he was.
Well, I mean, I don't know what, I think maybe I did see that scene. I can't remember, but yeah, it's I think that is I think that is a fitting, insane end to an utterly baffling and crazy legacy sequel in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think the last thing I want to say is I actually came up with what I think is a pretty brilliant idea if we're going to do legacy sequels. And granted, this one will probably take some time because of the fact that the franchise is entwined in legal issues. But I would love to see a Friday the 13th legacy sequel where it is Tommy Jarvis versus Jason. But the twist is we see every different actor who played Tommy Jarvis.
Oh, that's awesome.
So you have part 4 and part 6 Tommy Jarvis against Jason, and then part 5 Tommy Jarvis, because it's obvious throughout that entire damn movie that Tommy Jarvis was supposed to basically turn into a serial killer.
Yes. I think it would be fun. I think it would be fun if they decided to have all the final girls from the series, if they wanted to do a legacy one. Yeah. Like they're at dinner club now, and they get the dinner they go to Crystal Lake like once a year for dinner to talk about how they all killed Jason, but he came back, and then Jason comes back and he tries to kill all 9 or 10 of them at once. That'd be fun.
That would be fun, yeah. Yeah, that would be really good. And then we could maybe get some jabs at the fact that he evidently got onto a cruise ship on its way to Manhattan and decide, oh, hey, I'm just going to take care of this. I'm just going to take care of these people, even though, they're not at Crystal Lake anymore. But no, there's some ripe material for Friday the 13th legacy sequels if they ever get that franchise out of rights hell. But Phil, thank you very much for joining me on this emergency pod on the 2022 Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
It has been a pleasure. And I would say, if you haven't seen this film and you like horror movies, see this film just because you have to appreciate how terrible this film is.
Yeah.
This doesn't work as a legacy sequel. It doesn't work as a sequel. It doesn't work as a look at humanity or any kind of social issues. It doesn't work at all. And that's why I love it.
Now, one of the things I said in my reviews, the part of the reason that I thought like the grit and the grime came back was because of in the franchises because of the fact that we get really good high contrast between the shadows and daylight in the cinematography, which we touched on earlier. But I also said that part of it is the film is kind of nihilistic in its approach to life and death and character and story and tone and anything resembling coherent negative narrative. I can't think of a more logical way to wrap up this discussion. And this was a lot of fun. I love that we were able to get this together so quickly and sort of get some of these feelings out of our system.
Thank you so much for having me, as always, Brian.
All right.
Hey, this is David from the Piecing It Together podcast, a podcast about movies and the movies that inspire them. For over 4 years, each week, a guest and I take a look at a new movie through the lens of what other movies we think were either an influence or connect in some other way. It's a fun, unique way to discuss films that leads to a great list of other movies to check out that either explore the same themes and ideas or maybe utilize similar filmmaking techniques. Including special episodes in our side series that twist the format, we've done over 200 episodes, so there's bound to be one on a film you've been thinking about and want to dig deeper into. So check us out on all the major podcasting apps and at piecingpod.com.
I'd like to thank Phil for joining me to discuss the 2022 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It was a lot of fun to put something together quick and really get our thoughts on the insane movie out of the way. That's going to do it for this episode of the Sonic Cinema Podcast. Check us out at wherever you listen to podcasts. Click subscribe at the Sonic Cinema Podcast YouTube channel for the podcast as well as other quick reviews and filmmaker interviews. And more importantly, though, you can always check me out at www.sonic-cinema.com. Thank you very much.